Hi, good evening, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a minute. We're going to give another minute or two to let anyone that wants to jump on be able to do so if they can. Thanks. Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Chad Baker. I am chair of the Democratic Party here in York County, and I want to welcome you to our So You Want to Be a Candidate session tonight. We appreciate having you on board. We're going to go over just some basics about becoming a candidate. I know several of you, based on what you filled out online, are definitely looking at that possibility, whether it's at a local level next year, state level, in coming years. I know there's a few different interest areas on the session tonight. So we're going to touch on a little bit of everything, hopefully this evening. Talk a little bit about the process of becoming a candidate, and then from there, we will continue to talk about um, you know how to get on the ballot, find volunteers, that type of stuff as well. So we'll just jump right into it. I just ask that if you haven't already, if you can stay muted. If you have questions, certainly feel free to throw them into the chat area this evening, and we'll be happy to try to answer those questions for you as they pop up as well. If you're not familiar with Zoom, if you've not used it before, the chat function should be along either the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on what device you're on. If you just click that, it'll call up as a group chat box, and you can post your questions right in there. So let's go ahead and get started. So really, at its simplest form, yep, there are a lot of campaigns, a lot of options to become a candidate. Um, Over the course of the next 2 years, in 2021 as well as in 2022, you're going to find that um, there are literally hundreds of spots on the ballot for anyone that's interested in running. So in 2021, so next year, obviously everyone that's going to be on the ballot for the most part is on the ballot this year for 2020. So we're looking forward to next year. Obviously, not looking past November, but also looking at getting our candidates selected for next year as well. And one of the things that we look at is that next year is a local year. A lot of people refer to years between a presidential and a gubernatorial election as being off years. Those of us within the party, we always talk about the fact there is no such thing as an off year. There are two elections every year. There's a primary, there's a general election, and there are candidates on the ballot every year. And next year, really, in many ways, we feel that these are probably some of the most critical positions that will be on the ballot, because these are the people that are making decisions that will affect you immediately. We know how slow Congress moves. We know how slow the Senate moves. Even in Harrisburg, it takes forever for things to happen. But at a local level, when it comes to school boards and townships and boroughs, a lot of times that the work that they're doing is pushed through very quickly. it affects you almost immediately, and it most certainly affects you directly, whereas some of the larger bodies maybe do not. So these are incredibly important years. Like I said, for like 2020, this is an incredibly important, or 2021, it's an incredibly important year coming up. Um, we need people to step up and be interested in running in these positions. Almost every school district will have positions open on their school board. Within each of the townships, there will be supervisor positions, there will be auditor positions, the constables, tax collectors. All of those positions come up on a regular basis in townships, and the same really for borough races as well. The borough races include the mayor and the councils as well. And so does obviously in York City, mayor's races, the council race, and the constable are on the ballot next year as well. So again, if you think about it, in York County, we have almost 160 precincts in the area. Within those precincts, there's the townships, the borough races. Within each of these different areas, there are those different positions that are listed there. So what ends up happening is next year in 2021, we're going to have basically over probably 300, close to 400 available spots on the ballot for anyone that's interested in running. So there's plenty of opportunity to get involved at a local level. I almost guaranteed that positions like the auditor, a lot of these townships, a lot of these boroughs don't even run auditors. They don't have people running for them. So what happens is when you get into the election, you're going to see that space is blank. Probably for many of you, you've gone into the polling place and you've looked, whether it's in the primary or the general election, and there's not a candidate to vote for. And that's just simply because no one's running for those positions. So it's our goal to try to fill as many of these vacancies as possible for the 2021 election. In 2021, there's also a number of countywide races that will be going on. If there are any vacancies for the judge of Court of Common Pleas, those positions will open up, and inevitably, I feel like every couple of years we have those spots open up. So we'll know closer to the date of when petitioning and stuff begins next year, whether any of those positions will be on the ballot. We also, at the county level, have our district attorney, the county controller, the county coroner, and the recorder of deeds. All of those positions will be on the ballot, and they will be running all throughout the county. They represent the entire county. So every area from Dillsburg in the north to Stewartstown in the south to Wrightsville in the east and Hanover in the west, and all points in between, really. That's who these individuals are going to represent. Looking ahead to 2022, we know it's another pivotal year when it comes to governor. Governor Wolf will be term limited at that point, so he will not be able to run for re-election. So governor will be on the ballot, lieutenant governor will be on the ballot, and our state house seats will be on the ballot as well. For those that don't realize, the state house actually is a 2-year term, so they run literally every 2 years. So all 7 of the state house offices in the county will be on the ballot in 2022. So actually, let me take a step back here. There will be, I don't believe, off the top of my head, I don't think we will have any state Senate races in 2022. All of those would have been on the ballot the last time 2 years ago. At the federal level, there will be congressional races as well in 2022. Again, the House of Representatives seats are up every 2 years as well. So whoever wins in the 10th and the 11th this year, they will be on the ballot again in 2 years. And I believe that we will have a Senate race in 2022 as well. I believe Senator Toomey's term is up for re-election in 2022, so he should be on the ballot again as well. So just kind of in the basic form, what is a campaign? Obviously you hear people talk about campaigns all the time. You hear them talk about candidates, but kind of granularly, what is a campaign? Obviously, we give you the definition, the dictionary definition. It's a coordinated series of events and programs designed to deliver a specific message to targeted voters. That's a very simple overview of what a campaign is. But really, at its root, it's a conversation. It's a conversation with voters. It's convincing individuals that vote and on a regular basis, and potentially voters who don't vote on a regular basis, to consider you as the candidate that they want to win, that they want to put forth into that position. So really, when it comes down to a nutshell, when you look at it from a political sense, there's a lot of things that make up a campaign, obviously, but at its core, it's that conversation with the voters that's critical. Within campaigns, there are three major resources that we talk about. The first is people. This is the most valuable resource that a campaign has, whether it's volunteers, whether it's financial supporters, whether it's individuals that are helping to run a campaign. People are by far the most essential resource that you have. You need people to be able to help get your message out there. Whether you're running for school board or you're running for U.S. Congress, every position in between, you need people who are there to support you, that can help you, that can be part of that conversation that we just talked about a minute ago. Money, whether you are, think this is a good thing, a bad thing, indifferent. Money is a resource that is always sought after in a campaign. It's probably the most frequently sought after. Certainly, as we continue to go with campaigns, it feels like they get more and more expensive, especially for races like congressional, Senate. The presidential race this year is going to have a lot of money thrown around within it. At the local level, money is important as well. It's not as important, say as a congressional race, but it is important because it does allow you to build opportunities to contact and communicate and have that conversation with voters that you will not be able to do necessarily face to face, especially in the age of COVID. We're in a very unique situation this year where in a little bit, you'll see kind of what we say are the most important things when you're talking to voters, how to reach those voters. And one of the best ways is to talk to them one-on-one. And in the age of COVID, that makes it a lot tougher to do because you're not gonna be able to stand on their doorstep necessarily and do that. So money becomes an even more important factor in reaching those voters and getting your message out there. And the last thing is time. Time is probably your most, as it says, the most limited resource, because it doesn't matter how much planning you do, doesn't matter how far in advance you begin a campaign. The reality is it flies by. The next thing you know, it's election day in the year that you're running, and you look back and think, my gosh, I just sat in on a seminar, a webinar, to learn what it was to be a candidate or how to become a candidate. And all of a sudden, boom, here I am. So, time's that one that we can't control, obviously. It is the most precious of the resources that we have. That is why I will add, it is a great thing that all of you are on the call tonight, because if you're interested in running in 2021, 2022, or even further down the road, now is the great time to be thinking about it. If you're running in a position that's going to require a lot of organization, a lot of volunteers, a lot of money, a lot of those first two resources, now is the perfect time to be thinking about it. Most people think, oh, once we get through, November of 2020 and the next election cycle begins, that's when I should start thinking about it. Absolutely not. The most successful candidates are those that do the planning well in advance. And typically our biggest rule of thumb is we tell candidates, take the election day that you're running for and work backwards and develop your calendar to today. And what do you need to do from today through that date to actually, consider yourself having a chance and being successful in that campaign. So the campaign structure, we look at it kind of as an atom. Obviously, in the center is the candidate. They are the nucleus. They are the ones that are holding this whole thing together. If it wasn't obviously for the candidate, there would be no campaign. Then you've got your campaign manager. This is the person who's behind the scenes, the main organizer of your program. A good campaign manager should be someone who can help get volunteers to help out the campaign. They can help organize events. They can help organize talking points for the candidate. It should be someone who can help do a lot of the behind the scenes work, because ideally the candidate should be then the person that is out in front talking to the voters, listening to the voters, more importantly, and getting an idea of what those voters want within a candidate that they're looking to elect. The campaign manager kind of runs things in the background. For smaller campaigns, again, for like a school board race or a township race, the campaign manager is definitely not going to be as involved as they are in a state house, a state senate, or even a congressional race. But they're just as equally important, because they're the ones that are going to help you get in front of the people that you need to get in front of. Your treasurer. This is absolutely critical. Regardless, again, of what position you're running for, our best advice is to file a campaign committee with the state of Pennsylvania, or with the county, depending on the position that you're running for. For school board races, for township races, those types, the local races that we have on the ballot next year, your treasurer would be filing financial reports with the county. For the statewide and above, and the judicial candidates as well, those candidates are on the ballot technically as a state candidate, and therefore all of their information gets filed with the state party. Sorry, with Harrisburg, with the Department of State in Harrisburg. It's important to have somebody who knows what they're doing as a treasurer, who can have some experience possibly with accounting, who can help drive in some of the funds. They're not necessarily going to be your primary fundraiser. They can be, depending on the race. Obviously, if it's a smaller race, they can kind of pull double duty. But if you're running a race like State House, for example, the treasurer is going to be focused primarily on the money coming in and the money going out, and you should probably have somebody else that's focusing on the fundraising strategy. And last, the rest of the team. This is other volunteers, other supporters, your donors, other leadership roles. And when we say other leadership roles, this could be someone who handles communication. It could be someone who does events. It could be that fundraiser that we talked about, just a second ago. These are the people that are going to help run your campaign so that you don't have to. The reality is, once you get outside of your nucleus as the candidate, all these other positions are helping to lessen your load as a campaign, and allowing you to be more of the candidate. The more you've got to focus on these other things, it takes you away from getting your message out there as the candidate, having that conversation with the voter. So it's really, really important to try to find people that are strong in these positions, that are faithful to you in these positions, and that are willing to do the work. A lot of times they end up being friends, they end up being family. That's great. If they want that experience, if they want to help in that way, that's where they would fit into this category. So let's talk briefly about the phases of a campaign. There's actually 4 phases within the campaign year. And the first is petitioning. You've heard me mention petitioning a couple times tonight, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that here in just a second. Petitioning tends to happen every year, either between January and February, or February and March. And the difference is, for every year, every campaign year other than a presidential year, petitioning is typically middle of February to the middle of March. For presidential years, because typically the presidential primary is earlier in Pennsylvania, the petitioning gets moved back a month. So for most of you that are on here tonight, that are looking at those local races, those state house races, all of those, you're looking at doing petitioning February to March. And the thing that we say with petitioning is, if the time allows, doing any kind of organization beforehand is important. So if you're sitting on this call tonight, once we get through, what petitioning looks like, if you're thinking in your head, okay, I've got a group of 10 friends or 10 people that I know want to support me, that will help me get the signatures on my petition that I need. Um, Start talking to them now. Talk to them about the fact that I'm going to need you in February to help with this. To be quite honest, we don't know what petitioning is going to look like this year, coming up, because in the spring of 2020, petitioning was January through February. COVID was not as front of mind as it is obviously today. So we were still able to go out and knock on doors and have those one-on-ones with people. I'm not sure how petitioning may change in the coming year because of the pandemic, but we'll certainly keep you up to date on that as we get closer to that time. The second phase of the campaign is the primary. Obviously, that ends. It's from when petitioning ends to the actual primary day, which for most is going to be in May, except for a presidential year, and then it's in April. So essentially, from the time your petitions are filed and you become an official candidate that's on the ballot through primary day, that is the primary phase of the campaign. One nice thing is, if you're running an uncontested primary, so no one from your party is running against you on the ticket, it allows you to skip right to the next phase, the ID phase. If you are running a contested primary, that means that you are then trying to best the person from within your party to be the ultimate candidate beyond into the general election. If that happens, and we'll talk briefly about that as well, but if that happens, there's a whole other thing, a whole other list of factors that you've got to consider. The third phase is the ID or the persuasion phase, and this happens typically from the end of the primary. So as soon as you become a candidate that's going to be on the general election, on the general ballot, so from that point through mid-September is the ID or persuasion phase. And again, we'll touch on what that is in a minute. And then lastly is the GOTV phase. You probably have heard other people talk about GOTV. If you don't know what that stands for, it simply means get out the vote. And it's important, obviously, because you need to get the vote out everywhere to support you on election day. Now, that's changed. It used to be that GOTV efforts their focus started kind of mid-October to the end of October and went to election day in November. Because of the change in voting laws with mail-in ballots can go out as early as the middle of September. So for you as a campaign, you as a candidate, us as a party, one of the things that we are focusing on is we've got to start doing our GOTV efforts earlier, about a month earlier than normal, because people will have ballots in their hand a month earlier where they didn't before. So that becomes a whole new caveat to how our campaign cycles work. So I talked about that, one of the first steps for running for public office is to get your name on the ballot, and that happens through petitioning. A person needs to circulate a petition, whether it's a county petition, a state petition, or a federal petition. Believe it or not, there are different ones. And next year, actually, there will be different petitions for the city and different petitions for countywide races as well. So it gets a little bit more confusing. We will do a more in-depth workshop and training on petitioning as we get closer to petitioning and we have candidates that are expressing interest. We will do more detailed look at that and how you do it and what you need and what kind of petitions and all of those. But tonight we're just going to kind of look at it on the surface. And as we put here, it's not a difficult thing to do to get the signatures, but it is very specific. And if you don't follow the rules and guidelines for petitioning, you could potentially end your campaign before it even starts. Candidates can challenge each other. They can say, "Oh, I don't think that signature on a petition counts. I don't think that's actually a person that's in the Democratic Party or an independent or whatever." And you can actually have signatures thrown out. And ultimately, if you don't meet the threshold that you need to be on the ballot, they can throw your entire petition out, which means then you wouldn't show up on the ballot. So that's why that's important, and that's why we do the more detailed instruction, later on, closer to petitioning. But to give you an idea, these are the numbers that we're looking at. This is what you have to get on your petition, the number of signatures you need to get on your petition in order to be able to be considered a viable candidate for the general election, or for the primary election, first and foremost. So obviously they kind of work their way down there. You'll see, if you're interested in running for one of those countywide seats, the district attorney, the recorder of deeds, the register of wills, any of those positions, you need to have 250 signatures of people from within your party, from within your county. If you're looking to run for a school district position, it only takes 10. If you're looking to run for school district in York City, however, you need to have 100 per party. And where it says crossfile, I'll tell you what that means here in a minute. For York City Mayor, for York City Council, it's 100 signatures. And then if you're running for any township or borough position, even if it's a mayor's seat in a borough, you only need to have 10 signatures there. So for the bulk of our candidates next year, we talked about earlier about those positions within townships and school districts and boroughs. All of those, you literally only need to get 10 signatures to become a candidate on the ballot for the primary election. Doesn't take a whole lot, but again, it does take a little bit of coordination, does take a little bit of effort. As a party, we can provide you list of voters, registered voters in your area that are eligible to vote, and you can then take that list and get petitions signed for yourself or for other candidates in those particular areas. So I did mention with the school districts that you can cross-file. Only in judicial and school district races can you cross-file. So what that means is, if you were running as a Democrat, you can circulate a petition for you to get on the ballot as the Democratic candidate. But for school district and also for any of the judges' races, you can circulate a petition also as a Republican candidate. And if you meet the threshold, your name will appear on both ballots in the primary. So when Republicans and Democrats go to vote on primary day, your name will appear on both of those ballots. We advise 100% that you do that. If at all possible, make sure that you have 10 people that can do that, that can cross-file or that can carry your petition. Republicans should be carrying the Republican petition. Democrats should be carrying the Democratic petitions. So someone asked the question in the chat here, so what about township supervisors? As of right now, it's only the school districts and it's only the judicial races that I'm aware of that you can cross-file on. I can double check that for sure, but my understanding is it should just be those two areas that you can cross-file. By all means, if you can cross-file for both, for another race, we will make sure that you know that, because again, getting your name on both sides of the ballot is important. Because we've already seen in a school board race where there may be 5 positions opened on the school board, 5 people run on the Republican ticket, 5 people run on the Democratic ticket, and they all have cross-filed, so they are the same candidates. So they automatically get those seats. So it's important to make sure that you're not losing any opportunity in those races. And like I said, we will definitely, as we get closer to those races, if anything changes in cross-filing or anything like that, we will definitely 100% let you know that. And then the other rule of thumb, and we go over this when we do petitioning more in detail, is we advise campaigns to try to get double or triple the number of signatures that you're required. So if you're running for school board and you only need 10, get 30 signatures. If you're running for a countywide seat, get 500, if not 750 signatures. The reason for that is, one, it gives you obviously more opportunity to have contact with the voters. But two, if anyone decides to challenge your signatures, if you're sitting at 200, say you collected 253 signatures to become the district attorney, and someone on an opponent decides they want to challenge that, and they go in and they can find 4 signatures that don't count, it automatically wipes out your entire petition. It means you don't get on the ballot. So by getting more, you build a bigger cushion. It allows you a better opportunity to get on the ballot without any challenge or without significant challenges. So we definitely advise, especially in those smaller races where you only need 10, even if you get 20 or 25, you're in pretty good shape. And I just as an aside, I will say we have seen in races, we have seen candidates that have gotten tossed off the ballot because they didn't meet the threshold. So it's really, really, really important that you try to get more than what you need. So, we're now, moving on to, well, this says ID persuasion, but the primary phase is the second phase. So, there we go. I must have missed that one. So, okay, there we go. The campaign phase 2 is the primary. So once you're on the ballot, once you've filed your petitions, you're on the ballot, you hit the primary phase. So you focus largely on persuading the voters to vote for you, essentially. You're targeting what we call super voters. So a lot of times those super voters are going to people that voted in 2 of the last 3 primary elections or 3 of the last 4 primary elections. And that's because we know those are the voters that will come out and vote. And especially if you're running against an opponent that is from your own party. So if it's 2 Democrats running for the same seat, you want to try to reach those voters that you know are guaranteed to come out and vote. It's always important for us to try to reach out to new voters and try to persuade voters to come over and vote for a Democrat. But in a primary election, turnout is always significantly lower in a primary than a general election. And because of that, we hit kind of that low-hanging fruit, those guaranteed or almost guaranteed voters. And that's what a super voter, that's what we mean when we talk about a super voter, those that we know we can kind of depend on. As I mentioned earlier, if you don't have an opponent, you skip right to the next level. You go from the primary phase. You're going to want to do everything you can to get out and talk to voters during the primary, especially those from your own party, because if you can talk to them before the primary, after the primary, you can focus on all those other voters that you need to persuade to come into your column then. So for the primary, it's good to have that outreach specifically within your own party. So then we move on to phase 3, as I said, which is the ID or the persuasion phase. And this is an opportunity for you to really begin to understand what the voters in your district are looking for. What are the issues that are critical to them? And how can you translate that into your platform, into your campaign, into why you are running? So as it says, this is usually when the candidates are going to be answering that question, why are you running? So this is a good opportunity for you to start to get your platform out there, to start to talk about why it is you're running. If you're running for township supervisor, maybe it's because you want to make sure that infrastructure in the township is maintained, and that's something that's important to you for a number of different reasons. Or if you're running for school board, you want to make sure that the resources are available to our educators that are necessary. Or for state house, it may be tax reform or property tax reform. That's always a hot button issue when it comes to the state house. So during this phase, it's an opportunity to get to know your constituents or the people that could potentially become your constituents a little bit more. What are their concerns? And then tying that into your messaging as well. And as it says, make your message personal and tell your story. That is absolutely critical. One of the things that, if you look at President Obama's 2008 campaign, one of the reasons it was so successful was because they were telling their volunteers, get out there and talk about why you're involved and why you believe in Obama as the candidate. And this is the case, with all of our races. Why is it important for us to be running? Why is it that we are running? It's not necessarily just to get attention. I don't think any of us necessarily want to get into politics just to be in the spotlight. there's a reason, so what is that story? Is it that you have young kids that you want to focus on and their education, or is it, you have someone in your house with a pre-existing condition, so you're concerned about health care? you know Tie that into a personal message. Take those stories that you're hearing from voters and weave it together with your own message, because when you can make your message personal and tie it to their message personally as well, their stories personally, you begin to start to persuade them to consider you as their candidate. So this is also the phase where the direct voter contact becomes important. Again, we don't know what this is going to look like next year. Um, but typically, we say the rule of thumb is you want to try to have an interaction with a voter a minimum of 7 times. You want to have your message in front of them 7 times. The best way to, that we have seen and have experienced ever for getting your message out there is knocking on doors, canvassing, and talking to those people one-on-one. As I said, in the age of COVID, this pandemic, we're not able to do that. So the most critical thing that we need to do to try to persuade voters is now off the table. So now what becomes important? Well, it's making sure that you're having that contact in some other way, whether it's through phone calls, text messaging. A lot of campaigns have started to do personalized postcards where volunteers within the campaign take postcards. They put they fill the postcards out with information about, this is why I support candidate XYZ. And this is why I think you should as well. And then those postcards get mailed to voters in the district. Again, it's tying that personal message to the personal stories of the voters themselves. You can do mailers. Mailers are expensive. We know that. If you do a 4-color or multicolor mailer, you've got the cost of printing, the cost of design, the cost of postage. They get to be expensive. But they are effective. If you can get that in front of people. I hate using him as an example, but years ago, when Scott Wagner ran for state senate the first time, he was running as a write-in candidate to get on the ballot as a Republican as a write-in. He did a ton of campaign mailers. He obviously had the money to be able to do that. And it was incredibly effective because he won a write-in vote where he should not have won a write-in vote. Write-ins are almost impossible to win when it comes to those kind of races, especially in a special election. But because of his ability to reach voters with those mailers, he was able to get his name on the ballot as the candidate. So they are effective. They just cost a decent amount of money. And then advertising, same thing. Depends on whether it's digital, whether you're utilizing social media advertising, website advertising, newspaper, television, any way you can get your message out there. That's a persuasion point as well. Again, these can be expensive too, and especially for something like a school board race. The only times I would recommend school board candidates looking at this kind of advertising would be potentially when you can advertise through social media and you have a better ability to kind of drill down on the people that you're trying to reach. But outside of that, the television, radio, that kind of stuff, it's too expensive for a school board race, for a township race, even for city and borough races. It's not necessary. For state house, state senate, maybe, depending on how much money you can get raised, it's worth considering. But at the same time, it's really even then tough to consider. You'll see more, obviously, of that kind of advertising with the congressional races this year, obviously the presidential races, and so on. So for most campaigns, we would say, the door knocking, the phone calls, the postcards, the texting, those are key things that you can do. The campaign mailers, especially for some of the smaller races like the school board and the borough races, again, if you've got the money to do it, fantastic. But they're not necessary in those races. And then the last thing is, yard signs are not direct voter contact, even though Your supporters may have your yard sign in their front yard or in their windows. It is not getting your message out there. It's getting your name out there, but it's not necessarily getting your message out there. It's not convincing anyone to vote for you. Um, so we we have two different thoughts, two different lanes of thoughts for yard signs. The first is that, if you have the money and you're able to get yard signs, do it. If nothing else, they are an incredible morale booster to your campaign team. We saw this in 2016 when there were Trump signs all over York County and almost no Clinton signs. While those signs, again, don't necessarily persuade anyone to vote, especially for volunteers for our party, we looked around and it was demoralizing to think, wow, we've got all these other supporters of the opposition out there, and we're not seeing anything for the Democrats. And it kind of puts you in that frame of mind of, well, then why should I be doing really anything? So if you can get yard signs, fantastic. The other kind of line of thought is, do you like, there are people that say until a yard sign can go vote for you themselves, they're not worth the money. Everyone wants a yard sign. They do, I believe, place some importance. But again, I would not be spending an overwhelming amount of money for like a township or a school board race, unless you have the extra money to do that. I think in money is better spent in all of those other direct voter contacts that I mentioned earlier. We did get a question that popped up here that says, does your campaign staff sign a contract? No, they don't have to. I mean, obviously, again, the larger the campaign, the more people that you have on board, especially once you get into like state races, the state rep positions, the state Senate races, you may be working with an outside group who is going to have people that they recommend that you hire. So you can, you may get in a position where you've got enough fundraising and enough volunteers that you'll be hiring staff. And in that sense, we would say, yeah, probably at that point, you'd want to sign some kind of contract with them. But for the other races, again, your supervisor races in the townships, the school board races, borough races, city races, more than likely you wouldn't need to do that. So again, it all comes down to fundraising. If you've got the money that you can work with a paid staff, fantastic, because that means they can devote, that's their full-time job, they can devote that time on your campaign. If you don't have that ability, you're relying almost entirely on a volunteer basis. And that's how we do it actually at the county level as well. We do not have a full-time employee at the county level for the county party. We are strictly a volunteer-based organization. All right, so again, I'm not going to go into too much detail of this, and I should have mentioned actually beforehand, we do have a packet of information that we will send out to everyone after tonight that goes over a lot of this stuff, and actually has a little bit more detail as well. So as soon as we do that, if you have questions, based on some of the stuff that we maybe will zip through tonight, please by all means let us know. Door knocking or canvassing, as I said, is still by far the most direct voter contact, and there's lots of different ways to do that. And it's just some of the tips, and some of these tips are actually good for any voter contact. Listen to your voters. You are there to convince them to vote for you, but if you can show that you're listening, that you have heard their concerns, that you're compassionate to what their needs are, it makes you more of a desirable candidate. It allows the voter to see that once you get elected into the position that you're running for, you're going to continue to listen to them. The reality is you're getting elected to work for these individuals, for these voters. So you should be able to listen. It is something that a lot of candidates are not, or a lot of electeds, I should say, don't do, but really should be doing more of. Try to avoid confrontation. The issue that comes up here is, if you're running for school board and somebody wants to start to have an argument with you about gun control, or gun reform, whatever it might be, that's not something the school board deals with. That is not something that they directly deal with. And you can say to them, I understand you're passionate about this. I understand that it's something that is important to you, but let me talk to you about this, or let me talk to you about that, and kind of steer the conversation away from that more confrontational argument that they may be having. And by all means, do not engage, you're, as a candidate yourself, do not engage in that argument. Don't become confrontational yourself. Try to be as amenable to their point of view, even if it's something you don't agree with. Take it into consideration. It's part of that listening portion, and take that information away as something that you'll take into consideration. Never lie. That seems like a real obvious one, but it's real easy to be standing in front of someone and say, absolutely, I believe the same thing, or that's something I'm going to focus on. And then if you never do, you lose that vote. So it's important to stay honest and always ask a person for their vote. Seems like a very simple thing to do, but at the same time, it's important to be able to say to someone, will you support me? Can I depend on your vote? So the GOTV phase, the get out the vote phase, as I said, this starts now in September, runs through Election Day. And this includes kind of a whole mix of everything that we just talked about with that direct voter contact. And it really is the last ditch effort to get people to vote. It's that opportunity from September through November to say to that voter, I need you now. We've talked, I've listened, you've heard my point of view, I've heard your point of view. Now I need you to go vote for me. If you're definitely a supporter of mine, I need you to vote. I need you to fill in your mail-in ballot, send it back, and make sure you're voting for me on that mail-in ballot. Or I need you in November to go vote for me on Election Day. This is your opportunity to have that last conversation with the voter that if they are not persuaded already, will persuade them to vote for you. And it's the last opportunity for you to encourage them to go vote for you overall. So as we said, in 2020, the new voting laws have changed, and you can now vote by mail up to 50 days prior to the general election. Obviously, in the past, you could only vote on Election Day, and ballots are received at the Board of Elections by 8 p.m. the night of the general election. There's some gray area there right now that may be changing. Again, as of right now, though, we're working with that kind of rule of thumb. Person can register now up to 15 days before the election. That's critical because it used to be at least 30 days before. So you do have more time to try to get new voters registered to be able to vote for you. You can be added to a permanent absentee ballot list. And this is important as well. And this is actually going to be more important come this fall, and is important in all of our general elections. You no longer will be able to do the straight party ticket option. So it used to be you'd go in and you'd say, do you want to vote straight party? If you said yes, you could do straight party Republican, straight party Democrat. That's how you voted. That's not an option anymore. That option is gone. You now have to go through each of them and vote for each candidate. For us, at least here in South Central Pennsylvania, we think that's a good thing. I know in some other counties where there's bigger majorities for one party or another, they are not as keen on that. They like, obviously in Philadelphia, they like when you can go in and just click Democrat and get all the Democrats on the ballot. Obviously here in York County, the Republicans like it when they can do the same thing for just the Republicans. But our opinion is that this is actually something that's going to get voters to look at who's on the ballot, consider them more deeply, and hopefully then vote for the person they feel is the strongest candidate on the ballot. And then, as I said, these changes, specifically the mail-in ballot, extend the GOTV from mid-September now to the general election. So where you used to have more time to convince people to vote for you, now you have to take some of that time and try to convince them to actually vote for you, not to consider voting for you, but to actually do their mail-in ballot, go vote in person, whatever they're going to be doing, and put your name, check your name on the ballot. And election day itself is still a get out the vote opportunity. You can still be making phone calls, you can still be knocking on doors, you could be texting voters, trying to get them to the polls. And there's opportunities, lots of opportunities for people to work on election day, for volunteers to work on election day. You can have people standing outside of the polls. If you've ever been out, and handed a notepad or a ruler or a pen or anything like that, or even just a piece of literature for the candidate, those are the poll workers. The poll watchers are inside. A lot of times what they will do, they are not the paid staff, they are members that are volunteers with both parties, with candidates, with any number of people, and they may be tracking who is voting, to consider, they can give you an overview of who who has voted, and then internally that provides you some opportunity to reach out to other voters as well. You've got your phone bankers, those people that are making calls, the texters. You can have drivers that are getting people to the polls. You can have people out knocking doors, runners, people going from different stages, especially for bigger campaigns, especially for like countywide campaigns. Having people who can go to different staging areas throughout the county where you might be trying to get out votes is important. So there's a question here about, talk about the relationship and responsibilities with a coordinated campaign, kind of what the nuts and bolts are and how things are supposed to flow and operate. So coordinated campaigns actually mean different things to different people. And actually, from our perspective as the party, a coordinated campaign actually can differ from election year to election year. So for example, this year, we have people that are working in quote unquote what we're calling our coordinated campaign that are working with the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. They are representing, they are here to help try to coordinate volunteers and get volunteers out to knock doors, make phone calls, that type of thing, for a number of different campaigns. So we have 3 statewide campaigns that are on the ballot this year. So that state party person is helping to coordinate that. They are helping to coordinate volunteers for the presidential campaign. They are coordinating volunteers to help with the State House and the State Senate campaigns as well. We also then have congressional campaigns. So we have the congressional 10th and the congressional 11th. In those cases, those campaigns in some cases are working with the State House and the State Senate candidates. So again, when they're doing volunteer work, when they're getting volunteers out, they're covering not just the congressional candidates, but other candidates as well. So to put this a little bit into a little bit different perspective, heading into 2021, we've got all these external resources that are at our disposal this year that will be gone. The state party will not have a presence here in the county. Obviously, the presidential won't, the congressional campaigns won't. So it's left to the county party to be essentially the coordinated campaign. And what we did in 2019 was we worked very closely with all of our countywide candidates to help get out literature, to help do door knocks, to help do phone calls, to try to coordinate to get not just one candidate, but a slate of candidates pushed forward while we were out there. Now, each individual campaign, so if say you were running for county commissioner 2 years ago, if you want to do your own thing, you can, but as a county party, we are trying to coordinate all of our resources so that there's not as much expended in the way of volunteers, in the way of energy in general, and in some cases in way of money. We're able to consolidate some resources and help in that way as well. We would love to, and we are working towards this for next year, to have a better coordinated effort for all of our local races, not just those county races, but those township, those borough council races, all of those kind of races, school district races, we want to try to have as much coordination with those groups of individuals next year as possible as well. One of the ways that we do that, and I'll talk about it here in a minute, is through our regional structure. The county party has 10, is broken out into 10 regions that we've broken out for the Democratic Party. Each of those regions have regional directors. Within those regions, they have regional coordinators, regional committee people who are then to be working to coordinate volunteers in that area. And in that case, you know, those would be the individuals that are helping with school board races, township races, the countywide races, and then ultimately in a year like this, we're plugging them into the state party function where they're helping to represent a number of different candidates as well. That is a really kind of thumbnail of a coordinated campaign, and I'd be happy to talk with anyone in more detail about that offline after this evening, because it is something that if you can work with other candidates and you can work with other campaigns in your area, it's really important. And actually, let me give you a great example of it this year. You know, we have Carol Ho Evans, who's running for State House in the 95th. In York City, Spring Garden Township, West York area. Her area, her district falls completely inside the 10th congressional district. So we have Eugene D. Pasquale, who's running as the Democrat in the 10th congressional district. And then we also have, in the northern part, we have a couple other candidates in state Senate and state House races that are running in that campaign as well, in that 10th congressional district. So all of these candidates are working together, because if you're going to have somebody making a phone call and saying, hey, will you vote for, you know, say Eugene for Congress, they can also be saying, would you vote for Carol Ho Evans for state rep? If they're knocking on the door, they can be talking about both candidates instead of just the one candidate. So by consolidating some of those resources, by consolidating some of those volunteers, it allows you to have more coverage for your individual race as a candidate and then for your individual ticket. Because again, we know that if people support candidates up the ticket, a lot of times they'll go down the ballot and vote for those candidates as well. Our goal as the county party is the exact opposite. We want to make sure they're supporting our local candidates and then voting for Democrats up the ballot as well. Okay, so let me just tell you a little bit about the structure of the party. We're kind of leading into that anyway. So obviously the mission of the Democratic Party is that we are here to elect quality Democrats and promote the values of the Democratic Party here in York County. Very kind of standard mission statement that you're going to find probably most with most political parties. But here's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. This is the pyramid. This is a look at what makes up the Democratic Party of York County all the way up to the Democratic National Committee, or the DNC. At the foundation of this, whoops, sorry about that, is the precinct committee leaders and volunteers. These are the people that are in the ground in our neighborhoods, that are talking to neighbors, that are talking to their friends, that are talking to voters just across the street. These are the people where the volunteer core begins and ends. You know, if you don't have a strong base with your precinct committee leaders and volunteers, it is very hard to coordinate your campaign in general. So for us, the way this works is every precinct in the county, which there are 159, and I might be off on that, but actually it's changed because there's some precincts that have split out. But regardless, it's roughly a little bit more than 160 precincts in the county. Within each of those precincts, we can then elect a committee man and a committee woman. So we can have 2 committee leaders in each of those areas. So essentially, we could be starting on day 1 with 300 plus volunteers in the county if we had every one of these committee seats filled. The way that works is during a gubernatorial year, somebody that wants to run for the seat, they get their name on the ballot. They have to collect, I think, 10 petition signatures to get on the ballot. They get elected on primary day. After the primary, if they win, they're the committee person. If they are not if they don't run for that, and it's 6 months after, like this time of year, if there's not a precinct committee person, the party chair is able to appoint people to those seats. So again, if anybody's ever interested in or knows someone who maybe wants to be more involved with the party, um, let me know, because we can get them plugged into one of these seats and get them to help with some of the volunteer coordination. Really, like I said, at the very ground level, at the most important level of our structure. The precinct committee role, as I said, is to recruit volunteers. They help coordinate if we're doing canvassing, door knocking, phone banks, anything like that. They're helping to coordinate that in their area. And they participate and manage all those activities within those precincts. You can have additional leadership roles as well. Say there's a man and a woman already that are precinct committee leaders in your precinct. You can become a neighborhood leader or a block leader or even a street leader. If you're only comfortable talking with people within your block, by all means, we can plug you in as a volunteer, because every vote that you can help persuade within that block is a vote that's going to help our Democratic candidates up and down the ticket. So it's really important. The next level is our regional directors. As I said, our region, in York County, we break our regions into 10 regions. They are broken out in various geographic areas. I don't have the map here to show you, but we have, region 1 up in the north, region 4 is the city, region 10 is kind of like the southeast corner of the county. So they're all broken out geographically. And within each of those regions, we have a regional director. And that regional director oversees all of those committee leaders. So again, those people that are the precinct committee leaders will work directly with the regional director to help establish goals, meet those goals, and continue to push forward the direction of the party. Again, this is where it's important. If we have a regional director, they are going to be working closely with campaigns so that we can make sure that our efforts are in direct line with the efforts that you as a campaign are hoping to do. If you have goals, if you've got messaging that you want us to be following, we will work with you as a party, obviously, to help establish those things. But at the same time, we will help work as a party to get that messaging out. And again, regional directors they're actually elected after all the precinct committee people are elected in the gubernatorial year. We have a county reorganization meeting. They decide who the regional directors are. If at any point in time a regional director's seat becomes available, then again, the county chair appoints a person into that particular position. The executive committee and state committee of the party, really in a nutshell, the county party has 4 elected positions: the chair, the vice chair, the treasurer, and the secretary. The state committee members, of which there are 7. The chair of the party is always a county committee person, and then there are 3 men and 3 women elected in the gubernatorial primary to represent the county in the state party. And then there are the regional directors. Those 10 regional directors are part of the executive committee. And then there's a few at-large positions, things like communication and marketing, finance and fundraising, campaigns and elections. Those are all at-large positions that are available as well. And this body, their sole responsibility is to carry out the day-to-day planning. They are the leadership team of the party, and they are the ones, as it says, that are implementing the strategic goals of the party. Again, within those strategic goals, we are hoping to work with candidates to meet their goals, work with the state party to meet the state party goals, work with DNC to make sure we're meeting their goals. This is kind of the middle point for everything. Those volunteers that are working hard to get the messaging out, we need to get the messaging to them so it comes through kind of this core, the executive committee and the state committee. County chair, that's me, as I mentioned earlier, responsible for the overall strategy of the party, serves on the state committee, as I said. Every time I show this slide, it makes me feel like, I have a lot less to do than what I actually do. It is a position that I am honored to hold. It is one that I feel is has a lot of responsibility that goes into it. As you see, it's partially responsible for candidate recruitment. It's the chief fundraiser. I do a lot of the public relations side of things as well. It is a critical role. It is kind of, in many ways, the glue that holds the entire party together at the county level. So, as I said, I consider it to be an incredibly important position, and one that, I'm honored that I've had the opportunity to be selected to do this, to hold this position overall. The PA Democratic Party, they're responsible for obviously establishing the platform at the state party level. They do the recruitment of the statewide and potentially national candidates. When it comes down to it, though, the state party plays a very, very small role in the county level. They do not necessarily provide volunteers. They don't necessarily provide staffing. They definitely do not provide financial support. They are focused on helping the statewide candidates. While they are definitely making shifts, we're seeing major shifts this year where they are focusing a lot more on the counties. It has not always been the top priority to focus on the county level parties and some of these positions that we're talking about. That's why the county party considers it to be their main focal point to help out with those local parties. I'm sorry, with those local campaigns. The state party does and has been providing campaign on election day, voter protection resources so that no one's getting suppressed at the voting booth. They want to make sure everyone that wants to vote has an opportunity to vote. They are working very closely with the counties this year in that coordination for the state house and the state senate races. So again, it kind of fluctuates with the leadership with the state party, but we are seeing a little bit more involvement. But at the same time, we don't necessarily, look to them to rely on everything. A lot of the resources have to be generated locally for us to succeed. And then the DNC, there's a lot that goes into the DNC. There are representatives from the state that get elected to the DNC. They obviously set the platform overall. But again, the relationship between the Democratic National Committee and the Democratic Party of York County is almost minimal. Any relationship that we have is filtered through the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. And if you do decide to run for a state race, a state house race, state senate race, or a congressional seat, there are some offshoots, the DCCC, which is the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the House Democratic Campaign Committee, and the Senate Democratic Campaign Committees in Harrisburg are focused on helping those state house, state senate, and congressional candidates be successful. There's a lot of criteria here. If you're deciding to run for one of those positions, let me know, because you're not automatically going to get support from those committees, unfortunately. There are things that you need to do to get their attention, and we as the county party can help work with you to make sure that you do get their attention. So just in general, what do we offer from the Democratic Party? A lot. There's a lot of resources that we can provide. We can help generate walk and call lists for you. We can provide you data, and pretty much any data that you need, we can provide in the way of past election results, opposition research. We have listed their precinct profiles. What that does is we take a look at similar election years, what the turnout was for those election years, and we can actually drill it down to a point where we can say, based on the precedent set in these previous years, this is what we would estimate the voter turnout will be in your area. And then based on that, we can then turn around and say, this is what you need to do. This is the number you need to win to get, 50% plus one to be victorious on election day. It is very wonky. If you like the data, it is definitely something that we can provide a lot for you to look into. We can help with networking. We can help with marketing and communications. We do different training workshops like the one that you're on. We have 2 office spaces. We have one in York City and we have one in Hanover. And if you need meeting space, we can help provide in those areas. We can also offer office space if it's a countywide race or a race that's encompasses that geographic area, we'd be happy to do that. There's a lot of resources that we have that we can provide to candidates, and certainly we would be more than happy to do that. As your campaigns, as your candidacies start to roll on. And then, as I mentioned, we do have the two offices, I should say. Our headquarters is actually in York on South Duke Street, kind of right across from the Salvation Army on Duke Street. And in Hanover, it is on Carlisle Street. And it's kind of, if you're familiar on Carlisle Street in Hanover, where the Royal Farms is, we're kind of diagonal across the street from that. And there's our contact information, and you can find us on social media as well. So that is it for my presentation. I would be happy to take any questions. I know I've been trying to answer some of the ones that have popped up here in the chat. If you have questions specifically, feel free to, at this point, you can unmute yourself and ask those questions. Or if you'd like, you can always reach out and email me after the fact. Like I said, I will forward this information to folks as well, so that you have the packet of information. So you can obviously respond to that email, or follow up with any questions. So if there's any questions, I will give you the opportunity. If you want to unmute, go ahead and feel free to ask away.
I don't have a question, but I really appreciate the presentation. I'm really interested in this, and I really appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, no problem. And like I said, that's one of the things that, as we go on, we'll continue to do these kind of things, especially when it comes time to petition for the position. There's a lot of nuances with petitioning, and we've got a workshop that we can do, whether it's virtual or in person. Maybe by that time we'll be able to do it in person again. But regardless, we do have these kind of resources available. We do, as you can probably see on your screens, I think that we're recording this session tonight, so that we can then post it for consumption later on for anybody that's interested. So we may have some of these resources already stockpiled. So we're happy to do it. We're happy that you're interested in this, because again, we need folks to step up that are willing to run, that are interested in running, and we will do everything that we can in our power to try to help you out in that regard. Any other questions?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah. When will that packet be arriving that you were talking about earlier?
We should be emailing it out either tonight or first thing tomorrow morning. So you should get it, within the next, 12 to 24 hours, I would say. So, and it'll be it's a PDF, and it literally, I think the title of it is, So You Want to Be a Candidate. So it's the same as this. And it, like I said, it goes through a lot of the details that we talked about tonight. It includes the thresholds for petition signatures. It includes some information about developing messaging and how to talk to potential voters, those types of things, the communication with voters. There's a number of different things listed here. So there's some things that we didn't talk about tonight that'll be included in that. And then there's a number of things that we did talk about that it'll go into more detail about.
Is there ever going to be a change in the future with petitions as in regards to, let's say you're running for Congress and you need 1,000 to get on the ballot. Don't you think that would be just changed to just paying a fee? I mean, if you think about all the time and energy spent, is there any kind of push in the State House, in either chamber?
I'm sorry. I'm not aware that if there is anything that they're pushing, but it is something I know, I will tell you just from a party stance, that we would be in favor of. And the reason for that is because, well, let me put it this way. We would be in favor of it, but we'd have to make sure that it's fair to everybody that wants to get on the ballot. the downside to petitioning, there's a lot of downsides to petitioning. But yeah, for example, like with the congressional race where you need 1,000, you should probably have 3,000 to be on the safe side. And to try to get those signatures in February when there might be 3 feet of snow on the ground.
That's what I'm saying. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's tough.
what I'm driving at is it's so hard to find people to help you do work. And not only that, the small window of opportunity that you have once the state election bureau verifies the fact that you're an official candidate, you've got, which is like if the signing window is between February and March, and then the primaries is like at the end of April, so you've got like a month and a half to just introduce yourself to voters, and that is just not enough time. Why can't they roll that back to like the summer before and give you like 90 days to get on the ballot? And
Yeah,
then you'll have that whole year to introduce yourself. Or also just pay, like, let's say it costs maybe $2,000 or $3,000. Maybe say the DNC or whatever, they want like $3,000. I don't see where that could be like a problem. And then maybe further on down the list, for state rep, they want like maybe like $1,000. And just let's just go down a pecking order here. Yeah, I mean, the time, money, energy that you spend to do that. I mean, pro versus con, that sort of thing. I mean, I'm thinking, is anybody in the Democratic Party talking about that? I'm not in York County, by the way. I'm out here in Westmoreland.
Okay.
Just to
well,
let you know.
Thanks for joining us tonight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think, I don't know that there's anyone necessarily that is talking about that. I mean, it is for Democrats. I know there's a whole laundry list of voter reforms that they'd like to see, and obviously the mail-in ballots this year was one of the big initiatives. And it was funny, just recently we posted something on our social media that talked about the fact that they've now approved that there's going to be postage on your return envelope for your mail-in ballot, so you don't have to do that anymore. And we talked about that's one more step in progressing voting to be more readily accessible to everyone. And someone commented and said, that's not really progress. That's way far behind a lot of other, other options that are out there. So, and it's a valid point. I think, we still within the Commonwealth have some very antiquated ways of doing things. And like I said, as long as it is a process that would allow folks that want to run to get on the ballot, I don't think there's any opposition from Democrats for that, simply because it is incredibly, especially in some of the rural counties. Most of York County is a rural county. Most of Pennsylvania is rural. And with that in mind, it is so tough to get out and cover, to get so many signatures that you need. And even in some of these congressional districts that are so gerrymandered, you've got huge swaths of counties that need to be covered. We're fortunate, in our area, the 10th congressional district only covers half of York County and all of another county right next door. So we don't have certainly as much area to cover. But no, I fully agree with what you're saying, and I think there's got to be a more efficient way, because it does turn people off too. There are people that look at this and say, even with 10 signatures for some of these, they look at this and say, you know what, I'm not going to do the work. I don't know anyone that wants to do this. I don't even know where to get started. It would be a lot easier and a lot more candidate friendly to not have to do the petitioning. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you.
Are you the party chair there?
I am, yes.
Okay. Have you worked on campaigns at all before?
Yes. Yep.
What's Eugene polling out there right now in 10? I'm out here in 14.
Yeah, I haven't seen
Scott
anything recent.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I haven't seen anything recently, but the last time I saw, it was tight. He was pretty much even with Perry. And when you take in the margin of error, obviously, plus or minus, he's on the good side or the bad side. But it's it's a tight race right now. Now, obviously, neither one of the candidates have launched really into their television advertising, anything like that. But I do know on the coordination side, from our side of things, um, his campaign has been doing amazing numbers in voter contact and outreach. So everybody's feeling pretty good about it right now. But you never know. But polling wise, as of probably the last official poll I saw was probably a month or so ago, and he was pretty much dead even with Perry at this point.
Does your county party, do you, how do you fundraise? Like how, like, are you able to like, you know, what, do you have like multiple streams coming in? Are you able to, how are you able to stay afloat?
Well, that's a great question. And this year we're struggling. Struggling a lot. Um, we normally have two big events. We have a breakfast in the spring, and we do a dinner in the fall. The dinner is our bigger dollar donation event. The spring is normally it's a moderate priced event. I would say it's for those that maybe don't want to pay to go to the dinner. They can do the breakfast then. Obviously, both of those events were canceled for us this year. We already canceled for the dinner for the fall. We canceled in the spring for the breakfast. So those were two revenue sources that we lost. Our right now we're depending solely on just reaching out to voters and trying to convince them to donate, whether it's through something like an email blast that we can send out. That's, for example, we've got an email blast planned, obviously, at the end of the month for the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote, and we're hoping that just based on that ask alone, we'll get some money coming in that way. We don't necessarily have a big dollar donor. I'd love to say that we've got all these big dollar donors lined up to give us money, but we don't. We're constantly looking to try to cultivate that. We do have a chairman's club, which is our, you commit so much per year, and then there's different perks that we have built into it. And then we just this year created kind of a lower dollar donor group similar to that. Obviously, the incentives aren't as strong, but it allows somebody to donate, maybe a little bit more than what they normally would, but at the same time, not at the high dollar amount. Outside of that, we do buttons. We have a button machine that our volunteers design and make our own buttons, and then the money that we make off of those, we put into an account that's designated just for campaign activities. Political action campaign is what we call it, or political action fund is what we call it. And again, those are not, that doesn't sustain us entirely for that. But right now, with the Biden yard signs, any contributions we're making off of those go into the political action fund. So we try to build up some resources there as well. But no, we are in the same boat. We're fortunate that we have the two locations that we do in the county. Fortunately, our Hanover office is dirt cheap. It is not a big area. It is a small little office where we can at least have a level of visibility in what is our second biggest borough in the county. And then, of course, we have our headquarters in New York City, which is something we are looking to move out of at the end of the year. We're going to try to move into something a little bit smaller and cost efficient because it is a money drainer for us. But yeah, and again, we don't own those properties. We rent both of those properties. So, so that's a major part of our trying to get revenue as well for the year. But yeah, this year in particular has been miserable. We normally have like street fairs and local festivals, and the York Fair, which is a massive fair here that usually is 10 days long. We're not having that this year because of the pandemic. So really a lot of our traditional fundraising sources are gone. So we've been trying to we did an event before the primary where we charged, I think we asked for a contribution of $5. and you could log on and meet all the candidates for the Auditor General seat and some of our local races. And we ended up generating over $700 because people donated more than the $5 contribution to be on that event. So, and we just did that through Zoom. So,
Well, at least you got two headquarters. Like we only have one.
Yeah.
We only have one. At least you got two.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like I said, that second one, it's not a huge area, but it's more because that's an area of the county that the Republicans kind of had tried to lay claim to multiple times. And we were saying, no, this is an area where we are, there are definitely blue pockets in that area. So we want to make sure we have some visibility. Now we also have, we have a number of different clubs, Democratic clubs throughout the county who, through membership fees and that kind of stuff, raise money, and sometimes they donate to us. But in the example of the Hanover office, there's a club in that area that helps, their fees help to cover some of the rent and utilities and that kind of thing. So that's helpful as well. But again, we came into this year pretty strapped because we had expended a lot of money on our local races last year, especially on our countywide races last year. And then, had these grandiose plans for what we were going to do for fundraising, and, those were all shot to hell basically. So, so we're still kind of scraping by at this point.
Does the state party, do they give you any funds, to pay your rent in sort of that, does it, is there an avenue there? Do they break you off any funds at all?
They do not. No. The only time that we've ever had the state party pay for anything like that was when in 2018, they used our headquarters basically as their headquarters for the coordinated campaign, and we were able to charge them a little bit for rent that year. But outside of that, no, we don't get anything. I don't know that we get any funds from the state party. So
what I don't
ask, and yeah, we just don't get it.
What I don't understand is this might go along with the lines of what Howard Dean used to talk about, where he talked about a 50-state solution, where he more or less was getting into the intricate details of this sort of thing, what we're talking about here, where you have to break off some money and you have to send it out. I'm thinking when the DNC gets a donation, when they ask for $100 or, the different blocks they ask for, don't they chop it up and divide it and say, okay, we're going to send so much here and we're going to send so much there. And, we'll send this to the state of Pennsylvania and they'll divide it up. And I can't believe that the state party doesn't, I always thought that the state party got money from Washington, from the DNC. That's how I thought.
Yeah, they do get some from the DNC. Now, again, most of what they're getting is what they do through fundraising and donations and stuff as well. But even specifically for this year, I know the DNC had money that they had specifically earmarked for those swing states that went red from blue in 2016, and Pennsylvania definitely was one of those. And that money came to Pennsylvania, and that's as far as it went, was the state party. Now I think they're investing it in, supposedly they're investing it in coordinated campaign and voter protection and some of the initiatives that they've been working on, which obviously benefit us at the county level. But at the same time, none of that funding comes down. It usually comes down through resources, in the way of people that are trying to, well, in some cases, sometimes people coming into your county and trying to tell you what to do and who know nothing about your county,
Yeah,
that's another frustrating point as well.
I can't believe that something like that has never been mentioned or talked about. I don't understand that. How do you know for sure that money that the state gets from Washington, that they're not sending it elsewhere? Maybe that they don't consider York to just be a priority.
Yeah, well, and that's a possibility as well. I have no idea. It is very, very likely.
Isn't your county growing though? Like, isn't it turning bluer? Isn't, yeah, I mean, that's what,
Um, it not really. I mean, we were for all intents and purposes, we were one of the counties that got pointed at after 2016 as the reason why Pennsylvania went red because the turnout for Clinton in York County was a lot lower than was anticipated. So we've been making inroads. We've been trying to expand that. Now, a number of counties around us, like Dauphin County has gone blue now, and a lot of the surrounding areas have started to go blue. So we're starting to see some residual effects from that as well. But you know, again, my point has been, and this isn't just with money, but this is with even just something as simple as trying to get a speaker to an event. We have said to the state party, the governor is from York County. The lieutenant governor was actually born in York County. The auditor general is from York County. You know, those should carry some weight, I would think. You know, but
yeah.
rarely do they carry any weight. You know, when we're talking to the state party. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think again, I think when it comes to the resources that the state party puts out in the way of assistance and those types of things, they've started to improve, but they're far from where they need to be. You know, and I'm sure you guys know too, you probably feel it. We hear from the state party every single year, we hear, oh, well, the rural part of the state, we're going to focus on the T. You know, we're going to focus on making sure that we get people out in the T, and that we're supporting the T and providing the resources that you need. And then every year, it essentially we can chalk that up to lip service. That they're just saying it to sound good, and then nothing happens. So I'm hoping one of these years, I'm proven wrong in that mindset, but we haven't seen it yet.
Have you met Jason Henry yet?
I have, yes. Yeah, I do. I've actually known Jason for a little while. I knew him when he worked on Senator Casey's campaign. And I know he's worked on a couple different statewide campaigns as well. So, I like Jason a lot. I think he's incredibly competent in what he's doing. And I think, hopefully we see a little bit more of that change to, focus on the rural settings based on his experience as well, but time will tell. So
what went on at state committee? I heard there was like a big fight or something. What went on?
Oh, it was essentially with the DNC. We get 8 members that get elected to the DNC from Pennsylvania. You get 4 men, 4 women, and we had a lot more than that were running this year. And typically the process has been at the state party. There is a committee that basically interviews everyone, or is supposed to interview everyone that's running for state committee. Based on that, then that committee makes a recommendation as to this is who we would recommend as the 4 women and the 4 men. The problem with that is, well, there's 2 things actually. The positive with that is it does help ensure diversity, because that's one of the things that they're keeping in mind. If we had a slate that was all white, that wouldn't necessarily be the slate that should be put forward. So this committee helps with some of the diversity, focusing on the diversity. But the other side of it is, it used to be the state party said, here's the slate that we're putting forward, and they wouldn't even acknowledge any of the other candidates as candidates for the DNC. So at least now they're saying this is their recommendation, but there's a lot of folks that still don't feel that is the proper way to do it. It should be a case where all of the candidates make their case, and it's left as an open vote by the DNC or by the state party members to make that decision. So there was a lot of conversation about that. There always is every 4 years. And the unfortunate thing is every 4 years we're told something's going to change, it's going to be reformed. And then 4 years later we come back and it's the same process. So again, that's an area that needs to be more than just somebody saying, yeah, this is how we're going to do it, we're going to change it. It actually needs to change. And then on top of all of that, they were going to do, because it was a remote, it was a virtual meeting. They were going to try to get 300 plus people to vote that day on these positions, and they couldn't get the electronic system to work. So, that caused all kinds of issues as well. So it ended up being an online vote after the fact. But that was that. I know there were people frustrated about that, but at the same time, I don't think there was anything they could have really done to prevent that. It was just a case of, the technology not working when you want it to.
Do you like Tom Breyer? Is he going to run for anything? Because he come close.
I do like Tom. I do like Tom a lot. And I think, from a chair's perspective, one of the things that we talk about frequently is, sometimes it's just not your time to run for that position. And I am a firm believer of, if you want to run for it, run for it. You have every right to run for it. We will try to give you as many resources. But when you go up against somebody like Eugene, who's well known, obviously in this area and in the state as the Auditor General, it's tough. But I think Tom's brilliant. I think he's got a great progressive mind, and definitely has a bright future, regardless of the position that he wants to run for. So I hope, I have not had an opportunity to talk to him since the primary, but I would hope that he's considering something, because, I think, like you said, he came close in the primary, a lot closer than most people thought he would. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he had a really strong grassroots effort of volunteers that got out to support him. He energized a lot of young folks. But again, I think just, I was really impressed by him. I'm really impressed by his views, specifically the fact that he made it so far with progressive views as he did in some rural areas as well. Says a lot about him. So yeah, I'm excited to have him close by. He's in Dauphin County, so I don't know that we're going to get to see him in York County unless he runs for something at the state level, and that could be potentially as well. He could run for, a state row office, or he could consider a Senate run too if he wanted to, I think.
Come January 2023, when we get new maps, we're going to be cut down to 17. What do you think what district's going to be eliminated? What do you think is going to happen?
I honestly don't know. I haven't looked at that yet, and I don't know. So yeah, I couldn't even tell you reasonably, where I would think. But I think it's going to be a case where they're going to probably stretch out another district, and cover more rural area, which is unfortunate, because again, I mentioned it during the presentation. There are some of these areas that are so gerrymandered, and just the sheer distance that a representative would have to cover is almost impossible. And I think it's a lot to ask somebody that runs for that position, one, to campaign in a district that large, but two, then if they're elected, to represent that large of an area. So to me, I would guess, obviously all of the urban areas are going to maintain their districts. There'll probably be a little bit of shifting, kind of here in this south central corridor where I'm at. But I would suspect that they'll cut one of the rural districts and just stretch another one into that district.
We're trying to get rid of Reschenthaler out here, and it's going to be hard the way it is now. And come 2023, a lot of futures are going to be decided. A lot of destinies are going to be decided for the next 10 years. A lot of people, they're going to know what their futures are,